In this video, we're going to play my favorite game, Devil's Advocate, something I believe is required of the scientific process and which has been forgotten by too many in mainstream science today. We're going to examine the three main points one must cling to in order to be skeptical of the trends extrapolated in the videos on this resource site. And if it is my hope that you're able to make up your own mind about this topic, you have to know the side of the story that goes against our own conclusions, although we won't be too shy about responding to those claims either. This is also a lesson for those out there seeking truth. If someone won't look at the other side, who knows what else they're missing? The first two we've addressed already in videos, and they came right alongside the news that our field had accelerated its weakening from 5% per century to 5% lost per decade. It was a 2014 article in Live Science where the mission manager of Swarm first delivered that shocking statistic, and then promptly went on to give two reasons why you should not worry. We're going to take one and two together here. First, he says that these events can take many centuries to complete, so there is no need to panic today, and the sentiment behind the conclusion is something with which we can certainly agree. Second, he says that in any case, the magnetic reversals are unlikely to pose much threat to the biosphere, so even if it happens, there's no need to be worried. Addressing the timeline, it is absolutely true that we have evidence that multiple reversals can take place within such an event, and that it can indeed take hundreds of years to be over and done with. He was absolutely correct in this matter. However, if the field were to reverse tomorrow, and then do so again for the next 200 years, what real consolation would its end date be when the worst of the effects were on your doorstep now? One could interpret his and other scientists' words, even some of those who claim the reversal has begun, that we are a long, long way away, centuries, before there is any concern of even the first reversal of a multi-reversal event getting nasty. If we take his own words that the field is accelerated to 5% loss per decade, even if there is no further acceleration, we couldn't be hundreds of years away from seeing a very different planet that we see today. What if 35% field loss is enough to disrupt our steady way of life? What if 5% per decade accelerates to 5% per year? Shouldn't someone be asking that question? The North Magnetic Pole went from a crawl to moving dozens of kilometers per year. At this rate, hundreds of years would have it flipping multiple times, and would even put the slower moving South Magnetic Pole on the equator. Sure, these patterns could change at any moment. We don't know what the future holds, but the pattern kind of is what it is until we see otherwise. One hates to be directly confrontational in matters of science, but the claim that a magnetic event on our planet is not a threat to the biosphere is unsupported by any published work or by simply looking at the planet Mars, which once likely had a massive ocean on the surface before its magnetic field collapsed. The published literature seems to suggest exactly the opposite. These events are dangerous and may indeed cause mass extinctions. One could speculate we're already seeing some of these effects on the weather, and for the first time in recorded history, we have a power grid to worry about as well. Most people couldn't handle going back to the Stone Age. In general, here at the Observers, there's an agreement that these events can cause danger to the biosphere and to our electrified way of life. Swarm's primary job is to monitor how our field is doing, and in that matter, I believe the statistical reference of accelerated field loss can be trusted. However, perhaps not so much the broader statements about the process which contradict the published work, some common logic, and a bit of basic math. For you, the main concern is that the person who gave us the scariest information also appears to later contradict much of the published work on the broader topic in general. One might also be suspicious of their data findings, or equally suspicious of the danger posed by a magnetic reversal in our lifetime. We contend that you can do a bit of math and a bit of Googling the topic and find that things are moving faster and faster, and that many scientists would be terrified to see a magnetic reversal actually taking place. The third point one would look at is the idea that Earth's magnetic field right now is actually stronger than its average strength over long periods of time, and that we are actually just normalizing from a period of abnormally high magnetic field strength at Earth. The facts, as stated, are not disputed. Right now, Earth is coming down from a multi-millennium high of magnetic field strength and is above the halfway point, so to speak, of long-term data across Earth's history. This is absolutely true. The only thing that separates us from those across the aisle is how we interpret this data. MIT, highly reputable, has publicly denounced the fears about an imminent reversal due to the fact that we are just starting to descend now, and we have a long, long way to go. Again, with the fact that Earth right now is actually about twice the average field strength over geologic time. This is an image that one of the observers and I made up to communicate our take on those very same facts, a lesson in how there is a difference between disputed facts and disputed interpretation of those facts. If this is indeed a cycle that repeats again and again, then our magnetic field probably has a long-term strength curve that looks like a sine wave. When you are right about at average, you are either on your way to a very strong field or a very weak one. The accelerated field loss, when charted, looks a bit like a roller coaster, and essentially MIT has told us not to be afraid at what is potentially the scariest part of the ride. Then again, they are MIT, and that has got to count for something. Most recently, they followed up with an article restating that Earth is just normalizing right now from a high in magnetic field strength, and so therefore there is nothing to worry about. Given that this cycle has repeated over millions of years and many scientists think we're overdue for a flip, isn't it reasonable to ask how they know the Earth will pump the brakes and not go lower? When we have just seen acceleration thus far, and the observations of the solar and weather effects appear to corroborate the accelerated weakening, what evidence do they have that the math and repeating cycle isn't going to happen again now? Perhaps the most important question, can we handle Earth's average magnetic field? Evidence says that the field peaked in strength around the 8th to 11th centuries BC, or about 3,000 years ago. So for all of modern and most of recorded history, we've experienced a powerful interface with energy from space, the sun, the galaxy, supernovas, gamma rays, etc. We have no basis to know how our atmosphere or our global electric circuit will react to losing another 10 or 20%. If we are twice as strong as average and we just go down to average and do stop, that's still a big change to a global system. If we are normalizing, though, it probably shouldn't be speeding up. Then again, this is MIT, and that has got to count for something. I would like to also assert that one could always claim that the airline groundings during big solar storm events are coincidence, along with the many electrical issues and weather phenomena. There's no way to really have that conversation, and it is a possibility that you are required to consider before making up your mind. You must consider that these correlations are indicative of something else entirely, perhaps a change in the sun and its interplanetary magnetic fields. We're certainly seeing many changes on our star to be sure as well right now. Most importantly, if you choose to at least consider the possibility that this danger represents a threat in the near future, you should not panic, not do anything resembling incitement of fear or lawlessness. You cannot quit your job and run for the hills in preparation for something that nobody on Earth can predict. What if it's 10 years from now, 20? For all we know, the Earth is sick of doing this cycle over and over again, and it will just stop and go back to happy times. That is an aggressive wager, my friend, and potentially expensive. Let's step back here. After the Yom Kippur War, where Israeli generals fell prey to groupthink after they couldn't possibly fathom the danger posed by Arab movements here and there and were nearly driven into the sea, they instituted a policy that was referenced in the popular film World War Z. In the movie, they call it the 10th man, where if 9 people look at the same information and all come to the same conclusion, it is the duty of the 10th man to disagree and begin investigating under a different premise. Now, it's not called the 10th man. It's potentially called the devil's advocate office, as I've heard. And the concept is absolutely real. It is human nature to have a bit of normalcy bias and not believe that something major can happen until it does. In groupthink, we're all susceptible to that as well. Although small and generally not useful, the Red Team, the Devil's Advocate Office, is easily one of the most important in Israeli intelligence and is charged with challenging institutional assumptions. Shouldn't we have our own 10th man? The history of settled certain science is failure, change, and progress. And we have everyone right now saying that the status quo is not in jeopardy. For an observer, this is concerning. So since we are not asking you to change your way of life or really do anything other than consider watching the free 5-minute daily news updates to stay informed, perhaps you should ask why one side is telling you to only listen to them, that they have all the answers, and that if someone is saying anything against what they say, it's their way or the highway. I may ask a bit of basic math when you add up 5% per decade or more if it is accelerating. Same goes for the magnetic poles themselves. I may ask you to use some common sense when you see the big storms and technological events concurrent with the sun's strongest activity during those same periods. The path forward is clear. Eyes open. No fear. Be safe, everyone.